But now let's compare the different constraints that a big super fund has to deal with compared to an individual who is investing their own private wealth. And here you're getting a lot of differences. So while an individual investor is virtually unconstrained in what they do and how they invest, big super funds have significant constraints that they need to operate within. And it's often these constraints that drive some of the key differences that we see between big super funds and private wealth portfolios. Now, the other one that's gotten a bit of airtime today is liquidity. And it may seem somewhat counterintuitive that big super funds have constraints around illiquidity, and yet they have meaningful allocations to illiquid assets. Whereas private investors have no constraints around illiquidity, and yet the portfolios that are designed for them are usually entirely liquid. So while super funds and private investors both invest in sectors like infrastructure and property, private wealth portfolios are almost entirely invested in listed property and infrastructure, whereas big super funds are invested almost entirely in unlisted property and unlisted infrastructure. And in Frontier's experience, the typical MySuper balanced option would have a strategic weight of around 25 to 30% in illiquid assets. And the difference is a function of investor appetite, lessons learned, and also access. Now, we just had a great session on ESG just then, and it certainly sounds like things have progressed since I was an advisor. Out of all of my high net worth client base, which was about 60 clients, I had one that cared about ESG, and he gave us a list of fossil fuel companies that he wanted excluded from his portfolio. But regardless of an individual investor's ESG views, they just don't come under the same pressure that an institution does around ESG. And when I started working in institutional investments, I was really surprised at how front and centre responsible investment is. ESG considerations permeate all of my research and all of my advice. And it is a core focus for all of our clients on all of their investment options, not just their SRI options. Now, both private investors and big super funds are peer aware. It might just look a little bit different. So I'm sure we've all engaged in a barbecue stopping conversation about our investments and sneakily compared how we're doing financially relative to our friends. But peer awareness between private investors is often no more high stakes than a bit of friendly rivalry and occasional feelings of envy or superiority. Big super funds are also highly peer aware, with a mix of formal comparisons and market forces driving their increased awareness. Size does matter, and there are a lot of benefits to being big. Size means you can drive down costs, negotiate lower fees with managers, do more sophisticated and interesting things, which then gives you the opportunity to attract more and better staff. On the flip side, size can introduce complexity into your business and potentially erode culture.